Hi everyone, today let's take a quick look at Citi Bank, as well as the calendars, then we'll look at the charts, then we'll look at my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So Citigroup announced that they are cutting 10% of their jobs, and the stock moved lower, which is pretty unusual for these kind of cuts. Usually cost-cutting methods are rewarded by the stock market because it means that they will have more free cash flow, but this did not happen. Citigroup has not been great. They've really struggled since the great financial crisis in 2008. If you look at their chart, it does look pretty awful. But the question is, when can you start buying a company like this? They're pretty undervalued relative to their peers. And then here today, the stock is moving lower once again. They say they acknowledge the firm has been involved in some difficult situations, and they plan to deliver some of the plans that they shared in their 2022 Investor Day. I do think that's interesting here. If they can actually turn this company around, it is relatively cheap. And if they start to deliver on some of these promises, this might be an interesting opportunity to get into the financial space at a discount. They call it Project Bora Bora, but of course the question remains to be seen if this company can catch up with its peers. They say it is the least efficient of the group, which helps support that case of it being one of the cheaper of the group. JP Morgan tends to be the gold standard for banks, and they run the lowest efficiency ratio, saying that they are the most efficient of the banks. And you can see here, it has been underperforming its peers for quite a while, not just on this chart going back to March of 2021, but really much before then. It's not been a great performer. And like I said, it's interesting to see if it can make up some of this ground. Moving over to the economic calendar, there was nothing for today, and really there's nothing for tomorrow either. One Fed speaker, two Fed speakers, 3-year note auction, fairly interesting. And then Wednesday we have Fed Powell speaking and the 10-year note and another FOMC member. Pretty light on the news this week. Moving over to the earnings calendar, Realty Income beat on both the top and bottom line. That is a company that I do like, especially in the real estate space. For tomorrow, you got Gilead, Occidental Petroleum, fairly interesting. Not much. eBay, kind of interesting as well. And then for Wednesday, you have Disney. That's one of the bigger ones for the week. Warner Brothers Discovery, also fairly interesting. MGM can be fun to watch. Not many big hitters until Wednesday with Disney. Moving over to Max Payne, you can see we are sitting at 424. Price 435, put call ratio at 2, call wall at 430, top of the puts right here at 436, and that is basically where we're at. Again, that is signaling to me that we are basically done with this rally until we get a little bit of a pullback, and we'll take a look at that on the charts. Moving over to the charts, looking at the S&P 500 on the hourly chart, you can see we went straight sideways after a very small gap up, 0.18% on the day. Doji just above the 55-day moving average. We're at this previous high. If we're going to get rejection, it makes sense. Got this previous high. Got this previous low right in the same zone. Very interesting level. If we push straight through here, that could be a very bullish indicator. But after this rally, I do think we are pretty much done here. And I would expect more downward movement tomorrow. Does seem like that is starting here after hours already. See a little bit more movement down. 431.71 is my next level to the downside. Got the 55 EMA at 431.17. And then my next level after that, 428.59. Similarly on the NASDAQ, got another slightly up day, 0.41%, right at trend resistance. You can see it's marked many tops. It's not quite the same setup as the previous. You can see that previous low that we are testing on the SPY. You can see that previous high that we are testing on the SPY. We're a little bit short here on the NASDAQ, which is interesting. This has been the stronger of the two, but right now we're actually setting up a slightly lower high unless we push through this zone, which again would be super bullish. It's certainly possible, but it does seem more likely that we're going to see a slight pullback in my opinion. Not exactly a doji, but the setup on the SPY is cleaner. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, the Russell has already started that pullback, which is part of why I think we're going to see more follow through on that tomorrow. I got stopped out on this position. Next one for me, 170.35. I would expect to get through that level. Momentum says we're going to continue in that direction. 21 EMA at 168.61, 55 at 167.05. Right behind that level at 167.47. Overall, this looks weak. Rally up, sideways chop in the pre-market, in the after hours and pre-market, and then we basically fell throughout the session. We're falling after hours. Does not look great. Similarly on the Dow, sideways price action. Not as bearish, but I would expect it to follow through tomorrow. Level there, 339.11, and then 335.91 below that. Moving over to Apple and Tesla. Apple showing a much different picture. Massive bullish candle. Got above my level, 178.58. Could trade this up to 182.37 would be the next level for me. Zooming out a little bit, I have 186.81 above that. This trend is still intact and it does look quite bullish. It is worth noting that you do have some divergence on RSI though. You can see we made our high on RSI going back to Thursday from last week. Now we have higher prices and a lower strength, which typically means this is starting to peter out and we need to see at least a little bit of a pullback, develop some buyer's demand, and then we can start to see another continuation rally if it's going to happen. Tesla looks very similar to everything else. Did get a gap up through some wicks to this previous high on this wick from Friday. Now we are selling off once again, selling off a little bit more after hours. No change to the levels though. 214 to the downside. Below that, 197.75. You also have the 21 EMA that could hold as support at 210.91. While I do expect a little bit of a rollover, you can't deny that some of these stocks are having a nice run. So Nvidia, again, making new highs, very clean on the rally. It is selling off a little bit after hours, which is interesting. Momentum could roll over a little bit more here. Microsoft, you can see on the 4-hour chart, we did throw some wicks up to this next level at 361, and we are just a little bit below that, but it does seem like we're chugging right to that zone. Momentum slowing down, RSI super overbought, but we are still making new highs. Moving over to staples and discretionary. Staples continues to rally, sort of. We didn't get above the Friday high, but we are closing right on that level, 68.91. On top of it, to the penny here after hours. Momentum fading. You got the 200 SMA acting as resistance. We haven't actually gotten a test of that level, which is interesting. Usually I would expect a wick to that level before we see the sell-off. Maybe we'll get that tomorrow or the next day. But again, momentum, RSI looks weak. Similar on discretionaries, hitting that 144 EMA, sitting at 160.81 right now, selling off a little bit from that level. You have the highly traded zone from this previous consolidation. We are technically above it, but it does look quite weak at resistance. 158.03 just below there. 162 continues to be upside resistance, and then my next lower level would be 153.90. Moving over to breadth, you can see that Friday gap up, basically dojied at the 55 EMA and the 52.81 level here on the 50-day average, and then we sold off here today on both charts. You would expect at least a gap fill. I would expect both of these to move lower. First red day that we've seen in quite a few days, and we were just overbought. You can see we hit overbought conditions here on the 50-day average. 200-day, not quite there, but this was just a colossal move. Hitting that 55 EMA was just too much for it. Starting to sell off again, certainly could get down to this 36.23 level. I would expect a higher low setup, and then we could start to see this rally once again. I don't think we're going to sell off to like new lows or anything like that, but we just need a little bit of time to cool, generate some more buyer's demand, and then we can rally again. Moving over to yields, you can see the 10-year had a slightly green day, up 1.5%, 2-year yield up 2%. Kind of an expected initial. We expected a bounce from that 55 EMA, which we did get. Was not an engulfing candle, so that is not super convincing. If we stack candles to the bull side tomorrow, that would be a little bit concerning, especially coming off of that key support. Could be interesting. Momentum still bearish. RSI hovering here now. Momentum on the 2-year starting to move back towards bullish, but this is a new low on the 2-year. But we did establish that lower low on the 2-year, which is a nice change of trend. I would expect to continue to make new lows here based on that. Until we get a change of structure, this should just be a pullback on the 2-year. 10-year, I would expect more consolidation in this zone. Moving over to the dollar, slightly bullish day, not crazy, 0.18%, exactly the same as the SPY, which is interesting. Got above the 21 on the hourly chart, rallying up towards that 55 at 105.45. I don't think we're going to get a change of trend. We did get a lower low, and I would expect a lower high and a continuation lower still based on this daily chart. But on the 1 hour, we're seeing a slight change of trend to the upside, which is interesting. And you do have to respect that, potentially for another day or so. Moving over to bonds just for a moment, as you would expect with yields going a little bit higher, we got bonds moving a little bit lower. Nothing crazy, slight gap down, about 1% on TLT, J&K down 0.35%. Again, I still think these are going to go higher in the future. They just need a little bit of time to cool. You can see J&K with these 3 massive gap and goes that we got in a row. TLT, same thing, getting very close to that 55 EMA. needs some time to cool, establish a higher low, and then potentially rally from there. Moving over to the volatility indices, MOVE index bouncing from that 55-day average. We've been there for 3 days now. Did move a little bit higher. Interesting, especially with yields going higher. That could be a little bit of a sign of weakness for equities to come. VIX, on the other hand, slight gap up, fell to that same exact level. Very interesting. Tagged the trend, fell, and we're clearly stuck between those two levels. Momentum bearish, RSI still bearish, but if this continues to hold, could be an interesting area. We're still well below this midpoint on this kind of double top, slightly higher high setup. So that should mean even if we do get a bounce from here, it should be a lower high and then a continuation down, which does correlate with that same thesis where we should see a little bit of a pullback and then a rally from there. Moving over to my accounts, you can see I did lose a little bit on my IRA. That's because I got stopped out of that IWM position. I do think it's going to go lower. Qs, I made the money on those puts that I had, and then I have my core position here with covered calls at 362 with $7 credit. So I have tons of protection there. Even if we do get the down move that I expect, my break even to the downside is all the way at 355. So lots of protection, and I feel pretty comfortable holding this here, even with a potential down move coming. Overall, slightly positive on the day, and I am expecting more downside tomorrow. Let me know down in the comment section what you think of Citi Bank. Can they turn that ship around and cut costs and actually turn into a more profitable bank and a potentially good opportunity for investing? Or are they just doomed as an institution? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. None of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.